This is Mike Fish, broker for Minnesota Real Estate and Management, and today we're going to talk about some of the ways that buyers aren't successful in the journey, if you will. And so we're going to talk about a few things to consider if you're looking at buying a residential or you're looking at buying a lake home. There are a few places you want to slow down a little bit and consider as you start your journey. And I'm going to talk about certainly not getting into a whole lot of details. I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 situations that I've seen over the last year that where buyers in the end weren't happy with the process and the journey. And the first thing I would say is this. I always say you'll never get an ounce of pressure from us. I would much rather have a buyer look at 10, 15 properties, get some perspective, be comfortable, and pick the property that's that's right for them. That being said, as I always say, this can be a very fast game of poker as well. We've got multiple deals in the last couple months that were full price offers, as they're coming soon or the day they come on, cash offers. We're still in a market where you've got to move fast when you need to move, but there are points where you want to slow down a bit. And I do want to mention one of those points is making sure you're sitting down with a bank and you know where you stand. Had a couple clients recently, one in particular, no hard feelings at all, but we showed them several houses and got excited about one, and then they sat back down with the loan officer and realized that it was going to be much more complicated and they couldn't buy. Just this week I had a deal where we had a lake home I've got listed, where a buyer looked at it and they were super excited and they're going to write the deal and they're falling in love with it. It's just perfect. And then 2 days later they call me and go, "So sorry, Mike. After looking at it closer, we can't buy till next spring after we sell a different property." So it's heartbreaking, to spend the time window shopping and then find out that you can't move forward with something. So it is important to have a good loan officer, have things lined up, as you start that journey, right? And on that note, and it kind of all goes partially together, I always tell, buyers, you've got to take a deep breath and try not to fall in love with the first property you look at. Sometimes you get lucky. That first property is the right property, right? But, mistakes are made when somebody gets too emotional, too attached to an individual property and just says, we're going to make this work one way or another, right? And that can happen a lot. That's why in Minnesota we have the fiduciary duties we have to make sure agents are working in the best interests of those buyers. And it's very important that that you're working with a buyer agent that does have some experience, or at least is working with a good broker that can bring some of that perspective and experience in, because especially around these lakes, but also with residential, there can be a lot of factors involved in it that people don't necessarily think about, as they're putting an offer in. Next, I would say, for what it's worth, and it got very popular the last several years to skip that inspection. I have never encouraged a buyer not to have a good home inspection, and really take some time to understand what the costs of those issues are, whether it's a roof or a foundation or electrical, things like that. And I work with some of the toughest inspectors in the area. There's a couple and that I always recommend. And do they kill my deals? Yeah, sometimes they kill my deals. But I would much rather have a deal dead than a buyer make a mistake. And there are some inspectors around here that are extremely thorough. As I like to say, you'll know about every bent nail. You're going to have a 45-page book, with 75 pictures, but you're going to know what you're getting into. It ends up being almost a manual of, here's what I would need to do in the next several years to really make this property perfect. So again, not falling in love too fast, saying we're going to make sure we understand the issues with this property, do a very good inspection of it, considering all those things. And kind of along with that is getting excited and ignoring resale value. Now, a lot of people, it's not even in their mind an exit strategy. But I will say, in my opinion, when you're buying a property, you've always got to have an exit strategy, life happens. And certainly there's less pressure if you found a house that's, a place that's going to be your homestead or your retirement home, and you're saying, boy, we're going to have this place for 15 years and we can afford the mortgage. Then I would say certainly there's a less stress than having possibly a 3 to 5 year exit strategy. But life happens. I sold one in the last year where a lady had bought a property with her husband as a lake home, retirement home. Life happened. She had to sell it. And quite frankly, she took a $200,000 loss. And that's with me being as aggressive as I could on that seller side, because they'd gotten excited about the property. They had bought it out of excitement and paid almost twice what the county assessed value was. So it's really important that you're working with a buyer agent, and I don't want to get on a soapbox, but people that know me know my big beef with the industry is agents that in the end are manipulating a situation to get a deal done to get paid. And certainly, a good buyer agent in the end wants to get a deal done to get paid, but that should never be at the cost of a buyer making a mistake. So it's really important to be working with a buyer agent that knows what they're doing, that you make sure you're not sensing any type of pressure or manipulation, that allows you to slow down, take a deep breath as you go through the process. I will mention too, where you're buying, it's also very important to make sure you're looking at the zoning rules, the DNR rules, the covenant rules, and that's a big part of that inspection period. It's very important as a buyer, and not all buyers understand this going in, that you do have your contingencies. And I tell people your contingencies are like open doors. Here's an open door for us to be able to walk away or renegotiate something if something isn't right. And your two big open doors are inspection and your financing contingency. And your financing contingency is very connected to the appraisal, right? So if that appraisal, I see the appraisal as kind of a safety net, an anchor, when it comes to these sales. And so that's something to be cognitive of too, as a buyer, as you start your journey. So again, my name is Mike Fish, broker owner of Minnesota Real Estate and Management. We would love to earn your trust, but I hope that this video is bringing some value and perspective to your journey as a buyer. And I will also add to this, and I've got some other videos that are much more detailed, and I'll put some links down below this one. But it is so important, if you're looking at lake homes, that you understand what you're actually looking at, right? I've got a video that talks about the 20 top lakes in the area and the value and investment value of those lakes. And many buyers that I've worked with go on a journey where they're at a price point, they're looking at the bigger lakes, and end up getting pushed to the smaller lakes. So regardless of your price point, you are going to have a decision to make in this area. And that decision is, do I want a more modest place on a larger, more premier lake, or do I want a nicer place on a more modest lake? So I would say there's 30 to 40 lakes in play regularly around here, and a good buyer agent is going to understand those lakes and be able to give you a lake profile. The other thing a good buyer agent will do for you is they'll slow down if they can, right? It's a game of poker, and sometimes we got to move fast. But if they can, they'll take an hour or two, and they'll look at the comps, and they'll get back to you and say, the best I can gauge, this is where this is falling in. So some people see the buyer agent nowadays as a person that has the key and the person that writes the purchase agreement. When you're making a decision as big as buying a house, a buyer agent should bring a lot more value than that to the table. So thank you for your time. Depending on where you're seeing this, please subscribe, like the video, follow us, and of course, stay in touch. We would love to earn your trust and your business.